Welcome to Balanced Life with Debbie Carlin Boyle. Conversations connecting to a healthier you. The show that gives you all the latest and greatest health and wellness information to inspire you to live a life of balance and joy. Debbie Carlin Boyle is a health and nutrition coach, personal trainer, and fitness instructor who helps her clients live in balance with everything that feeds us, in addition to the food on our plate. Please welcome your host, Debbie Carlin Boyle.
Hello. Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining in my show today. Excited to have you. Excited that you are joining me. I am broadcasting from home, which I don't usually do, but little known fact, I broke my foot about a week ago. I have a new puppy who you'll probably meet, who's going to pop up on my lap here in a second. And anyway, I was holding him and I got up off the couch with a slipper that wasn't on and my foot went like this and I broke a small bone in my foot that is causing havoc because I can't drive because it's my right foot. So, and you need your right foot to drive, no matter whether you're right or left-handed. So I can't get to the studio, so I'm home today. So welcome on this spring day. So excited to have you. I love this subject that we're talking about today because I've never had a show about it. And I think I have over 250 shows in the last 7.5 or so years. And in all that time, I haven't talked about this subject, and we're going to get into it in just a second. But before we do, I want to remind you that this is a live show, and if you're watching live or listening live, you can call in. So take this number down as long as you're not driving. The number here is 323-524-2599. Once again, 323-524-2599. So if you want to become part of the conversation, if you have a question, you want to make a comment, you have a story about this subject, become part of the conversation, because I do this podcast not for you to just listen, but for you to join in. And it's a conversation that connects to you, and we want to hear from you. Now, if you're listening after the fact or you don't want to call in, I take a look throughout the show at my Facebook page where we're streaming live today and my YouTube channel. You can ask a question or make a comment there. If I see it sometime during the show, we'll address it. If I see it after the show, myself or my guest will answer or address it. So just make sure that you go ahead and take yourself into that if you can. I also want to tell you a little bit about me for those that are tuning into my show for the first time. I am, as you heard at the top of the show, a personal trainer, a fitness instructor, and I am a health and nutrition coach. So what does that mean? It means that I help people find balance with everything that feeds us. We have food that physically feeds us that we need to have nourishment from, right? All our vitamins, minerals, and nutrients come from our food, we hope, if we're eating non-processed food and we're eating healthily. But there's so much more to life, one of which we're going to talk about right now, that creates joy and happiness and longevity. And I am here to dig into something that might be out of balance for you or some things and help you find a way to connect with that and bring that goal up to fruition and meet it. And sometimes you need a coach to do that. We all need coaches. Everybody needs a coach. Even the goats in the world need coaches. So to do that, you can go to my website, which is Balanced Life by Debbie, DEBI.com. And there you'll see consultation link. Once you go through the website and see all the details of what I do, it's a free consultation. Take it. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what might be taking you out of sync, lowering your alignment, and what we can do to bring it back up. Because longevity with quality is what brings ultimate joy. And that's what we're trying. That's everybody's goal, I would think. And I can help you achieve that. So I'd love to hear from you. All right. Without further ado, we're going to get on with the introductions. So with depression anxiety and loneliness on the rise, people are looking for an alternative to traditional mental health therapies, and psychedelic medicine is emerging as one of those solutions. My guest today is Matt Zemon, who is the author of two best-selling books, Psychedelics for Everyone, a beginner's guide to these powerful medicines for anxiety, depression, addiction, PTSD, and expanding consciousness, as well as Beyond the Trip, a journal for psychedelic preparation and integration. Matt holds a master's degree from King's College London and specializes in the impact of psychedelics in mental health, focusing on their potential to catalyze profound personal transformations. As the executive director of Sacred Path Community, he merges academic insight with his passion for the safe and sacred use of psychedelics, ensuring a supportive environment for spiritual exploration. His consulting work extends to medical practitioners in the field of psychedelic therapy. Before his own transformative experiences, Matt's entrepreneurial background laid the groundwork for his current mission to broaden understanding and access to these transformative substances. As a seasoned public speaker, Matt has shared insights on National Public Radio, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and has been featured in over 75 podcast discussions like today's, resulting in almost 1 million downloads. So let's dig into the world of psychedelics. Shall we? Please welcome my guest, Matt Zemon, to the show. Here's our applause.
I love that, Debbie. That's a lot of fun.
So welcome, Matt. I'm sorry. We do have our little audience. They live in the studio walls, so they get very excited when we have guests. So that's the applause and the cheers. I know you sought me out, and I thought right away, wow, this is a conversation I haven't had yet. So let's have it. I would like to get started with your origin story. So not just how you personally got into the whole psychedelics, but where you're from, where you were born, what your childhood was like. Anyway, your origin story. Let's start with that.
So I appreciate the question, Debbie. And again, thanks for having me on. So I grew up outside of Philadelphia and had parents that got divorced at a young age. I was going into first grade. I lived in Center City, Philadelphia, and then moved out to Havertown and finished up my middle school and high school years there. Became an entrepreneur and built a number of different businesses, and have been married. This will be our 25th year together, and have two beautiful children. One's 20 and one's 18. But about 5 years ago, and I've never been a drug user, not even a huge drinker, just I like things the way I like things. I keep things in control. And about 5 years ago, a little bit over 5, some friends invited me to a guided magic mushroom journey. And at first I said, no, it's not the type of thing I do. And they said, no, you really want to do this. You love to learn. And this is like getting a chance to learn deeply about yourself, and you love to travel. And think of this as just a great trip. So long story short, I did it. And in that first experience, I reconnected with my mom, who died when I was 22. She was 49, and had this just incredible experience where I could feel her and pull like a string from her to me to my children. And I realized in an instant that she wasn't gone, that there's this other, that she was still here, and that I was carrying her forward and my children were carrying me forward. And it was so beautiful. And then in the same journey, I felt incredibly safe and loved. And in the next moment, I realized, wow, I don't feel incredibly safe and loved in my everyday life. What's going on with that? And as this journey progressed, it was insight after insight after insight. So when I came out of it, I wanted to know more. And I did two things. I went back to school, first to understand the science, and got a master's in psychology and neuroscience of mental health, focused on psychedelic medicine. And I also started traveling the country and the world, trying different psychedelics by different types of people, MDs, PhDs, taitas, shaman, and exploring consciousness. And then that has led to going from being an atheist to a deep belief in the sacred to understanding psychedelics for spiritual purposes as well as for medical purposes, and to doing the work I do now, both with the spiritual community or the sacred community and the medical community. And just thrilled to be having this discussion today, Debbie.
So, yes, this is interesting. So, for you, it was a bit of trauma and emotional healing for you because of losing your mom at such an early age. I'm curious, that connection that you had with your mom, going back to the first experience, how did that manifest? What was that like? I just really curious about this. I do have some experience in psychedelics personally, so I didn't have that kind of, and I know there are different ways to be supervised and not be supervised. And I'm a product of a child of the 50s and 60s, so you can imagine what my experience was like. But I'm curious, where was the aha moment? Did it come after the experience? Did it come during the experience that you have a strong memory of it? I'm just really curious about
I
that.
do indeed. Yeah. With so that particular medicine, psilocybin, or mushrooms, the active ingredient, magic mushrooms, when people do a psilocybin journey, it's typically, let's call it 4 to 5 hours of an experience. So it's a longer acting psychedelic than some of the others that are out there. And in my experience, these insights come in waves. Like you're in kind of a scene and you're experiencing that. And then maybe you come up for air for a little bit. And then you drop into a second scene and you come back up in a third and so on. And in this, I don't know exactly where, but it was middle or early or late beginning or middle. I kind of became aware of this presence and realized it was my mom. And there's no other way to describe it besides this understanding that she was with me, and this just feeling, and this feeling of connection. And it was truly, just beautiful. And I mean, it was just so fascinating for me as someone. I lost my dad was, I think, 19 when I died. Sorry, I was 19 when he died,
Oh,
and
geez. So you lost them within a couple of years
a
of
few
each
years
other.
of each other. My
And that's
grandmother
trauma
before
itself.
that. Yeah, there's a lot of
Did you have
death.
younger siblings that you
I have
had
a
to help
sister who's 18
raise?
months younger.
Oh, so she was a little bit older, so you weren't like babysitting or having to, yeah, she was already
No,
grown up.
she was a freshman in
Still,
college, a
still very
sophomore in college.
traumatic.
It
I
was.
lost my father when I was 20 and he
Mm.
was 46. So, and I have siblings and one as young as 12 when he passed. So it's just losing one parent is traumatizing in itself, but two is it's just too young for them, for you, for, life itself. It's just too young. So you
It is
must
too
have been
young.
holding on to so much internal angst about that this opened a door for you, this one experience,
It's
I would
interesting.
say.
I mean, again, we're talking about 22, and then I was, I think, 46 when this first experience happened. So it's a long time in between. So
Hmm.
if you would have asked me then, was I holding on to angst? I would have told you, no, I'm fine. I think what happens after you lose somebody, or after I lost, I'll tell you what, for me, it's like you just go on living.
You
We get
do.
married, you miss your mom, you have children, you miss your mom. It just is. And but for me also, I had given up on God. Like there's no way there's any, I didn't believe in anything after that experience. And then comes psychedelics and this new um possibility opened up. And now I have deep belief in that we are spiritual creatures having a human experience, that there are other layers. And again, whether anyone else believes that, that's okay. I don't need that. But
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
me, I have a different perspective than I've ever had before in my life. And I'm feeling very grateful for this perspective. I want to go back
So,
to you for a second. Just, I mean,
yeah,
losing your parents and losing your father at 20.
father, yeah.
Um, does How do you connect that to the work you do today?
So he was so a lot, and the reason being, is I got, so I had this side hustle of health and wellness. Even when I was doing this very stressful, high powered job as a television commercial producer, and trying to raise a family at the same time. And, you know, it was just a lot of, and being a young mom and going through what young moms go through with adrenal fatigue and all of that. I had a side hustle of teaching fitness classes and teaching a spin on a bike because I saw my father at age 30. When he was 30, I was 5. I saw him going down for the count. I mean, he was sick. He had Hodgkin's lymphoma. And back then, they weren't doing stem cell transplants back then for that. They are now. I'm not even sure if he would have been a candidate, but what I saw at a young age is a lot of suffering and a lot of people I loved. And it wasn't just my father. It was grandparents, it was aunts, it was uncles. It was people in my family, in my lineage, going down for the count. And when I turned 18, I realized what the connection to this was. And it was the way they were taking care of themselves, eating horribly. Grew up in a family that ate lots of sugar. Sweets were always a reward, which they still are for many people in countries all over the world. But this was in excess. Food was excessive. And like I said at the top of the show, if you're eating processed food, you're setting yourself up for illness, right? So, which is exactly what happened to my father and all the people I love. So I thought, how do I turn this around? Because I plan on being a parent. So I was 18. I plan on being a parent one day. I plan on being, there for them. And my goal was to run after my great grandchild. And my father never even got to the point where he could walk me down the aisle. His father walked me down the aisle and died shortly after that. So I had different goals for changing that directory of my lineage and my family. And so I had the side hustle that then turned into around 2016, I went back to school and got all my health and coaching and nutrition certifications and hormone certifications to really help people start from wherever they're at. And I wanted to talk to you about that too when we get to it, because I've had a lot of people who come to me from depression, and partly it's because of the way they're taking care of themselves. And we change the way they take care of themselves and things lift. So we'll talk about that, because I want to get into all of the things that, working with psychedelics can help. But for me, it changed my directory. And now I have both kids are in the health field. They're both very, holistic. My daughter had a home birth. She's planning on doing it again. I mean, these kind of things I just changed the legacy, I just changed the bad, poor habits to good ones. And that's really what it comes down to, is creating new healthy habits that still satiate you, make you, excited to eat and learn how to exercise, that you find things that you love and all of that. It had nothing to do with my childhood. Everything in my childhood was opposite that. So basically, it was a way for me to change things, not just for me, but, I have a grandchild now, and I run, except for right now, because my foot is broken. But basically,
but normally,
I'm with her 5 days a week, and I run after her. And my goal is to run after her kids, too. And I am in my late 60s, so I plan on being around.
It's doable. Yeah, very doable.
Yeah. So that's why I got into this field, because of him. Because of the sickness in my family. Yeah, that was my long story. So I'm curious in just, I can see how working. So being from the generation, right, from the 60s, and experimenting with psychedelics, for me, it was magic mushrooms. I have plenty of friends that in the 60s and 70s were experimenting with LSD. It was unsupervised. I saw things that you never want to see. A fatal accident. Somebody jumped out of a window when they were going through when they were tripping. And so it was a negative experience for me, being that I know it's generational. It's totally different now. And microdosing and working with psychedelics is mostly monitored for people with depression. I mentioned at the top of the show, what are all the other things that working with psychedelics can help people who are going through PTSD? What else?
Love that. So again, most of for me, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I was part of the Just Say No generation. So my entire life has been only knowing prohibition. Controlled Substances Act was 1970. I've only known drugs are bad. There's no medical use. You're gonna get addicted. They're gonna fry your brain, and bad things are gonna happen. So I've been very surprised to learn that the science does not support that position. Right now, there's over 300 academic institutions studying psychedelics, and they're studying it for really anything that can manifest from a repetitive thinking pattern. So depression can manifest from that, anxiety, OCD, eating disorders, substance use challenges, behavioral challenges, all sorts of things in the mental health. And then also in the physical side, there's things that are being studied. That's not my area of expertise, but I know inflammation and pain management and some other things with psychedelics are being looked at as well. It is, and then I think it's important, just as a foundation for this conversation, Debbie, to talk about, there's 3 ways that people access psychedelics in America. Some people access it through a medical model. That means they want to have a prescription with a diagnosis and somebody in a white coat with credentials behind them managing this. So in America, the only psychedelic that they have access to today is ketamine. Hopefully this August, MDMA will be re-legalized and they'll have access to that. And then hopefully psilocybin within a couple years after that. So we were just talking about the 3 ways that people meet psychedelics in America. We talked about the medical. The second way is the decriminalization model. So across the country, there are decrim nature chapters. Their underlying premise is that no adult should tell another adult that they can't put nature in their body. So it's beautiful. It's libertarian. I think we can all understand it. The thing that's important but not often discussed about the decrim movement is there's also an access issue. So right now in the medical model, it's expensive. And it's not covered by insurance. So part of decrim is that everybody should have access to nature. Mushrooms are, as an example, are inexpensive to grow. And it's important that people, for whatever reason, are able to access this for healing the way people in the medical model. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the spiritual model or sacred model. There are somewhere between 200 and 2,000 psychedelic churches in America. They range in the types of sacraments they use and how they do it. But their premise is that we are a country founded on religious freedom. We have states, many of our states are founded on religious freedom. And that when the use of psychedelics to connect with your sacred is a religious freedom exercise and should be protected constitutionally for all of us. So there's a few churches that have been given what's called an exemption from our DEA. And then there's a number of churches, like the ones that I work with, that have said, that process involves lots of lawsuits and is not really set up to really give the exemptions. So we're going to practice responsibly. We're going to practice with a lot of intention and attention on how to do it carefully. And when the government does come up with a process that's reasonable for an exemption, we can't wait to go through that process. But 3 different ways that people meet psychedelics today in America. And that's the only other one we didn't talk about is psychedelic tourism. So that's when you get on an airplane and you go to Jamaica, Costa Rica, Peru, Mexico, the Netherlands, and you have an experience there. And again, it seems incredible to me that we are forcing people to get on airplanes, go to other countries to experience a consciousness expanding and healing opportunities versus here in America under good supervision and controlled environments.
Right. And there's a lot of things besides experimenting or using psychedelics that are force us to go to other countries to do. Like stem cell therapy, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, things like that. Certain stem cells are not legal in this country, so, and we know as a fact that it is a way to heal and actually give somebody life again. It's working in other countries, and for whatever reason we can't legalize it here. So um, I'm not surprised about that. But I have a question about the churches and about the experimenting. And we know that with everything in life, it's not a one size fits all type deal. So how do you individualize if a person's not being medically treated and going through these experiences? How do you do it as a group and individualize? Because everybody's going to experience the outcome differently, and everybody is going through a different reason for experimenting with it. So when you do it in a group setting like that, I'm not quite sure how that works for everybody.
I love this question, Debbie. So, what's nice about this question and the answer to this question is we have thousands of years more experience using psychedelics in group ceremonial settings than we do in a medical model. The medical model is more of the experiment than the group model. We can go back. There are cave drawings in Africa, somewhere between 4,000 and 9,000 years old, with mushroom shaman. There are shaman all through Siberia who worked with mushrooms. There were witches burned throughout Europe for their use of these entheogens. And certainly we know of the history in South America, Central America, and up here with the Native Americans in North America of their ceremonial use of psychedelics. So in my experience, when people come to a ceremony, a psychedelic ceremony, and actually I'll just talk from the experiences that the services. What might you expect? So
Yeah.
you're going to start in advance with a health intake. So ideally, all of these churches are checking to make sure you don't have any contraindications, either taking prescriptions or supplements, or actively suicidal, bipolar, in a state of mania, schizophrenia, those types of things. They're going to check for those contraindications that make sure you're going to be relatively safe when you're using these psychedelics. Many of these churches are going to ask for a intention setting process where you spend time doing an exercise and thinking about, why are you doing psychedelics today? What's bringing you here today? Then maybe you'll come to a location and you'll start with some breath work or yoga or meditation or something to ground in and center yourself, and then do a ceremony. In the ceremony, maybe picture mattresses and blankets and eye masks where your eyes can be open, but you're covered in darkness, and facilitators that are created some type of altar and have live music ready for you. And you take whichever medicine is the ceremony you've been. So some ceremonies are, let's call them heart openers, where you're taking, maybe it's MDA or MDMA, and you're working on turning off shame, blame, and guilt and feeling love for yourself and love for others. Other ceremonies might be the interconnectedness of all things. So maybe you're taking psilocybin and you're trying to remember who you are at your core, that you are loved and that you are worthy and that you are enough and that you are not separate and apart from nature, but that you are nature and that we are all connected. Or maybe you're taking a mescaline type of psychedelic, or you're taking ayahuasca. And then there's non-duality medicines like Bufo, which Michael Pollan talks about in his book, where there's no subject and object or time and place. You're just part of the universe when you take that psychedelic. So different ceremonies have different purposes and use different sacraments for those purposes. To the
And
individual, go ahead, Debbie.
leads you through those ceremonies. So you're understanding what you're trying to achieve with that particular psychedelic, correct?
Yeah, it's
So
important that you know the mindset coming in, that you know what you're taking, why you're taking it, how much you're taking, how long it's going to be, what you might feel like. All those things speak to your mindset going into this ceremony. The facilitator, the guide, the shaman, the title, whatever you want to call that person in the front of the room, their job is to create a container so that you can dive deep into yourself. And that's one difference oftentimes between ceremonial and therapeutic. Nobody's talking to you, interpreting in real time in ceremonial. You are in there doing your work and you're in a space to do that. in medical model, sometimes you're taking the psychedelic and you're using it almost as a therapeutic lubricant to have conversation during the psychedelic experience sometimes. And that's just two different philosophies on how to use the medicine. But it's individually dosed. And in my experience, when you take a large dose ceremonial psychedelic, you are able to go deep into yourself, even if there are people next to you in the room. That's okay. And in fact, I actually believe it's optimal that the energy created, the fact that Debbie, you might be crying while I'm laughing and this person's not saying anything, that energy moves around the room and can be felt. And then afterwards, when we're in a sharing circle and you talk about something that came up for you and I talk about came up for me, my learning, healing, and growing is your learning, healing, and growing, and vice versa. So we're all doing this as spiritual peers in this process.
So, I'm doing this, I'm really playing devil's advocate a bit.
Sure.
So, um, you know, you're obviously taking an alternate drug, that can alter your mindset, alter your chemical reaction. So do people get sick? Do you see people getting sick, vomiting, or, sick in a negative way, like hallucinating and things like that? I mean, I'm sure you see, because you can't, because of the individuality of it all, you can't possibly monitor who's going to react in what way to certain doses of certain things.
So when we talk about side effects of drugs in general, we can talk about the side effect profile. So I want to start to answer your question by starting with what's legal today. So when people take antidepressants today, we know there are side effects. We know they are highly addictive. We know they're hard to come off of. We know that weight gain, lethargy, suicidal ideation, sexual dysfunction on some SSRIs, studies have it as high as 73%. I mean, lots of side effects that last for a long period of time with legal drugs that are available today in America. When we talk about the side effects with most psychedelics, so again, I'm going to talk about psilocybin or MDMA, ketamine. We're talking about side effects that occur during the while you have the medicine in your body, and then very few side effects that last beyond that period of time. So then your question was, well, what negative? What do you see when people take the psychedelics in terms of those side effects? When there are psychedelics like ayahuasca, where people do get sick regularly, that's kind of a part of the process. It's called purging, and that's expected. When you take ketamine or psilocybin or MDMA or MDA, most people do not get sick. It's in the single digits, low single digit people who have nausea. And then there's ways that you can work around it. So if you're going to go get prescribed ketamine, they might also prescribe an anti-nausea medicine for you if you're prone to nausea. With psilocybin, if you're prone to nausea, maybe your facilitator will grind up your mushrooms and put them in a glass of lemonade or orange juice to let the enzymes start to break down in the glass before you put them into your stomach. Maybe they'll put them with some chocolate. Maybe they'll make them into a tea. So there's lots of ways that you can keep nausea down with something like psilocybin. But for the most part, MDMA, psilocybin, the mescaline products, and ketamine, no, you're not going to get nauseous. You then brought up hallucinations, and you said that's as a negative side effect. I would actually argue, and again, this is a philosophical debate. There are some people who believe that these medicines are biochemical. You take them, you put them in your body, it does what it does, and off you go. And there are ketamine clinics across America who operate with that mentality. Totally legal. It's a matter of perspective. There's others who believe it's a biochemical, psychosocial, spiritual process. So you want what's happening with the chemicals, and you want to go through the process that sometimes involves hallucinations or, hallucinations, sound distortions, things like that as part of your experience. So that you emerge knowing something versus being told something or thinking something. So it becomes a very somatic response to the medicine. So in my experience, the hallucinations are a feature, not a bug.
Right. Yeah. So, like I said, I've experienced with, and now my kids will know, but I've experienced the whole magic mushrooms thing. And granted, it was at a time, it wasn't in a facility where it was supervised. It was, let's go up to the mountains and get high and drop mushrooms. And I had a negative experience. I'll tell you, so I'm completely, just personally, completely 100% drug free. I mean, except for maybe some caffeine in chocolate or coffee, I have adverse reaction to drugs, and hallucinogenics didn't work for me. They made me paranoid. It made me, and any kind of drug throughout my younger and older life had negative effects on me because I'm out of control in my, and I don't want something chemical. And this is a personal thing. And I know you have a saying, I mean, it's the name of your book, that psychedelics are for everyone. But you also have a quote that you say that but not everybody should do it. I believe you said not everybody should take psychedelics, but psychedelics are for everyone. So I'm going to have you explain that, because I personally know and I've tried just about everything, except I haven't tried LSD, but I've tried just about everything and I've lost control. Like I don't drink, for that reason, because alcohol makes you lose your sensibilities. And I don't want to lose my senses in any way. I don't want to lose my sense of smell, my sense of sight, my sense of sound. I don't want to affect my gut. So that's a personal thing for me. So when you say psychedelics are for everybody, what do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, what I mean by that, and thank you for that question. So when I say psychedelics are for everyone, I don't mean everyone should take a psychedelic. What I do mean is we all have the right to understand how do these work,
Mhm.
um, and have the opportunity to choose for ourselves whether we want to take the psychedelics with the various risks that are associated with them, and then have the opportunity to have the various benefits that are associated with them. So my goal is for everyone to get educated on psychedelics, and whether it's for them, for someone they love, or just to help change the way they might vote in the next election. I think this is important to do. The and it's different than what we've been taught in our just say no society. I also really do hear you that when you take a psychedelic, and I would hope your audience hears you too, when you take a psychedelic, you enter into a non ordinary state of consciousness. And in this non ordinary state of consciousness, you are not in control and you're very vulnerable, which is where we talk about the responsible use and the safe use of psychedelics is important. There's multiple studies out there for those who are curious about. People ask me all the time, are psychedelics safe? And I say they are relatively safe, but I prefer risk reduced. And there's a study from Imperial College London by Dr. David Nutt. And he said, let's forget how drugs are classified and just look at harm to self and harm to others and stack them up. And on the far left hand side of his chart, most harm to self and harm to others is alcohol. It's like a 73 in his chart. And you can work your way down, and tobacco's up there, and heroin's up there, and you keep going down, 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 down. And at the bottom right are mushrooms. It's a 6, and MDMA is a 7, and LSD is like a 9. So are there risks with these medicines? Absolutely. Can you, in a non-controlled environment, have people have accidents like you spoke about, Debbie? Absolutely. But relatively, these drugs are physiologically safe and non-addictive. And I think that information, especially for people they've tried antidepressants, they've tried talk therapy, they're continuing to struggle with PTSD, depression, anxiety, um, again, behavioral challenges, substance use challenges. Given the research and the results that are out there, to know these are the risks and these are the possibilities, is this something you want to try? And I think that's important that people have that choice.
Yeah, that they have the opportunity and the choice,
Mhm.
not that they're going to be arrested, for doing it or fined or whatever it might
Or
be.
all of it. Correct.
Yeah, all of it together. I mean, so because we're going to have to wrap up in about 5 minutes, even though we went over, we only have 50 minutes to discuss. So, but there are many benefits, and for people, I mean, they can become more creative, they become more empathetic, they get rid of the trauma and less anxiety, less stress, less, I would assume it could help a mother going through postpartum. But how do you know if you don't go through a doctor? How long do you stay on? What psychedelic do you use to become more creative, to find self-discovery, become more, become a better person, let's say, overall? How do you know how much you do? How long do you do it? I mean, do you personally continue to experiment with psychedelics? How often do you take? I'm just curious about that whole, it's a lot in there, but I'm curious
There's
about.
a ton in there.
I know, so I'll let you address it.
Yeah, I mean, I love that people, when once somebody decides to go down this path, in my experience, they start asking questions, and they might go to a psychedelic society near them. They might find someone who runs a psychedelic church. They might go to a psychedelic doctor and start asking questions and saying, these are my intentions. What should I do? Should I do ketamine? Should I do psilocybin? Should I do ayahuasca? What do you think? And they're getting opinions and they're gathering information. Ideally, they're reading books like mine, Psychedelics for Everyone, or Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, and getting information, being like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, but I'm interested in that. Okay, great. And then where do you want to do it? So the three S's that we talk about, if you pay attention to source, set, and setting, regardless of which modality you choose, the probability of having a bad trip is very low. Source is, where do your drugs come from? If you go the medical model, they're from a pharmacy, you can check that off. If you're going to do this in a decriminalization model or a church model, ask them, do you test your drugs? Where do they come from? Set is the mindset we were talking about. Are you clear in your intentions? Are you saying yes because you want to do this? Or are you saying yes because somebody else wants you to do this? In my experience, if this is not your decision, don't do it. And then setting is, do you have control over your physical environment? You're not going to be interrupted by kids and dogs and neighbors. Nobody's going to touch you. Nobody's going to talk to you. You can feel safe in this container to do your thing. Do you have music to move you through it? If something happens and you are scared, is there someone there who knows what they're doing, who can move you safely out of the loop of fear that you're in into something else? Mm-hmm. Again, if you're talking to a medical provider, the questions are the same. How experienced are you? What's going to happen? What's the music? What's the environment? If you're talking to a church, same questions. So these apply across the board, but those are the types of things that keep people safe and lean them towards a good psychedelic experience versus a challenging psychedelic experience.
For something like ketamine, let's say, for depression,
yep,
that is being prescribed, do you find that people are good about self-dosing and like, I think about overdosing, and someone like Matthew Perry, who, I mean, he had excessive amounts. So and I know I did read his biography, and I know he had substance abuse, overdoing any chemical that went into his body. Are there studies that show that once people did that, are people overdosing, basically what I'm asking?
Yeah, for the most part, people are not overdosing on any of these psychedelics. Now, Matthew Perry, I don't know all the circumstances around his specific death. I do know the amount of ketamine in his body, from what I've read, was closer to an anesthetic dose than a therapeutic dose. Mm-hmm. So much, much, much more. Ketamine, interesting. There are some studies that show the potential for addiction with ketamine. So it's kind of ironic that the only legal psychedelic we have right now is one of the few that has an addiction possibility. But I do think it's important again, I'm not prescribing this, but I do think it's important that when people do this in a controlled environment, either under the supervision of a medical professional or under supervision of a spiritual or a guide, that their dose is being monitored, their frequency is being monitored, and the probability of spinning into a too much to a substance use challenge is very, very low. We have not seen people get addicted to ketamine in a medical model. Doesn't mean it's not possible. We just haven't seen it yet that I've read about. And then again, in a ceremonial model, it's such an infrequent thing to do that addiction really should not occur in that process.
Yeah, as I was asking, I worked in drug rehabilitation for a long time. Cliffside, Malibu. I was the health consultant there. And, you know, and I know that psychedelics should help in addiction, but people who have addictions, what I saw a lot was, okay, maybe we're helping them get off heroin, but now they're smoking, 3 packs a day, they're overeating. They switch their addictions, from alcohol to food or, so I was just wondering, how do psychedelics, and I guess it's the same, pretty much the same, help people who in addiction to relieve from the addiction, but not become addicted to the psychedelic?
Yeah, and this is a super important question. In our culture, much of the medication that we are prescribed and we take numb symptoms. They don't get to the root; they just numb the symptoms, and they stabilize us so we can move on to something else. That's not what psychedelics do. When psychedelics are done again with intention and attention, with people who know how to use them, the goal is that we, as the user, can understand at our core that we are loved, that we are enough, and that we are worthy. And then we can see clearly when our behaviors do not reflect that type of self-worth. And for many people, we choose behaviors that might manifest as alcohol or drugs or gambling or eating or over exercising or anything that's over too much, because we are at our core trying to make up for our parents didn't love us the way we wanted to. We had some childhood trauma. We had some type of bullying. We had something happen to us younger, and we forgot who we were and why we're here. And I believe psychedelics can help people remember those things, to know those things in a way that's different than being told those things. And then with that awareness, the brain enters into a period of plasticity following a psychedelic. And then we can use people like you, Debbie, as coaches who can help us actualize what we saw in the psychedelic experience and turn the insight and awareness into action.
Right.
And that's the power of working with a coach or a therapist and the psychedelic.
Yeah, taking a positive step at using this. And so getting back to that question of how often I know it's so individual. Are you still using psychedelics?
Absolutely. So there's some people who this is a once in a lifetime experience. That's what the Greeks did for thousands of years. It was once in a life, you do this and take that and go forth. I believe in more. For me, it's more of a quarterly thing. There's always something to get awareness from. I use it as a service to connect again with my sacred, to go into this remembrance. It's a place of worship for me, and it always teaches me something and helps me get clarity on where I am, where I'm going, and where I've been.
Well, I'm sure everybody would like that outcome, would like that scenario. So I know you're going to be involved. We're going to wind it up here, but we'll wind it down here. I know you're going to be involved in a summit, and it's like coming up next week, I believe. Do you want to talk about that? And we'll put the link up on the show notes so people can register. But
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think we have free registrations for this summit. That's going to be incredible. I mean, lots of amazing speakers from a variety of disciplines. And you talked to them again, there's all sorts of positive disciplines that really pair nicely with psychedelics. So for some people, it's exercise, it's getting out of nature, it's better sleep, it's better eating, it's better hydration. For some people, it's a mindfulness practice, breath work, lots of different modalities. And in this healing summit coming up, which we'll put the link in, there's
Tony, can you put a photo up of that? Can you see it when I sent you a photo so we can put up on the screen for people that are watching? I noticed like you had I think it's Marianne Williamson is part of it.
She is speaking,
and
correct.
Jane Fonda. And
Jane Fonda's there too. Yeah, it's really fun it's super cool. And they're offering their perspectives, and it's it's lovely to be able. I think they're expecting like 30,000 people. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's over a period of 5 days or so, correct?
I believe it's 5 days. The Heart of Nature Summit
Yeah.
is I'm looking for it. Yeah, I do believe it's 5 or 6 days, and people can log in, and there's ways to get the recordings, and it's lovely. And I do hope your listeners. I mean, if you're listening to Debbie's show and her podcast, you're probably into fitness, you're probably into coaching, you're probably thinking about how do I optimize my life, period, and
Mhm.
physical just being one piece of it. And I think what I want to say to you to wrap this up is that psychedelics aren't a cure for anything. They are a catalyst. They're another tool to put in the toolbox to use along these other tools that you're using as an optimization process to become the most full humans that we can be while we're here.
I love that because I was going to ask you for final thoughts, but you just
Yeah.
gave it to me. I like that. I like having those tools, and I like having just one more thing to be able to say, hey, it may not be for you, but you might want to explore, is it or isn't it? And having that as well, knowing all the things that psychedelics can do for you. And you've opened up that door by writing these books and letting people know in your experience. I always believe people's stories take them to
Mm.
where they are today, and then they share their expertise because they become experts in that particular field for what they experienced, and then they bring it out to the world. And I love that you're doing that. Matt, give your website and a way people can access your book.
Yeah, so mattzemon.com is the site. So if you're looking for a speaker on psychedelics for your event, that's a great way to get in touch with me. I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm active on Instagram. My books are anywhere books are sold. And then I have an Audible of psychedelics for everyone that does seem to be the most popular way that people digest it. It's kind of amazing to me. And then my new book should be out in August, which is a veteran's guide to psychedelics that is specifically the preparation and integration workbook for veterans with veterans stories in there. And it's being done in collaboration with Heroic Hearts Project. And all 100% of the proceeds go to Heroic Hearts. And there's also a coaching or therapist guide. So whether you're licensed or not licensed, there's a guide that goes with it. So if you're working with a veteran, they can have their workbook and you can have yours. And yeah, that'll be out in August.
Oh, I love that. That's great. I've done a lot of workshops with veterans and veteran families in
Mm-hmm.
with a nonprofit called Makeovers That Matter, and helping people,
Mm.
kind of change the relationship with food and getting back into these are vets that are trying to re-assimilate, get jobs, and get back into society, if you will. And I love that you're working with veterans because I think we push that aside way too often. And that's really cool that you're writing this book. I want to
And we're
thank.
seeing Republican and Democratic support because of the veterans and because the results are so profound with the impacts on PTSD. This is not becoming, this is one thing that all of Congress can agree on is that psychedelics are probably good for veterans, people of sexual assault, those types of people.
Yeah, I can see that loud and clear.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine. So let's hope that, people get out and vote when we need
There
that.
we go.
I want to thank you for your time, your expertise, sharing everything, being patient with all of this technical situation that we had. I don't know if I'll be back in the studio in 2 weeks. I do my show twice a month, but I hope I will so we don't go through this. But for those of you who started with us and now are picking up again, I thank you for your patience. I didn't give out the phone number again because we are not live, but I do want to say, if you want to ask Matt a question, goes to the comments of any platform that you are watching the show on, and I'll reach out to Matt. If he doesn't get it right away, I'll make sure that you get it and that you can respond, ask a question, make a comment. We can keep the conversation going way beyond the time of the show. So especially since we've had to tape the rest of it. So thank you, everybody, for your patience with that. Thank you, Matt. Let's keep it going. Go to my YouTube channel, subscribe. I have so many pieces of content there in health and wellness. You're going to find something that relates to something you're going through. So I would love for you to subscribe and give some ratings. And thank you for joining me today, being patient. I hope you got a lot of great information. I know I did. And I want to keep reminding you to keep going out and finding those conversations that connect to a healthier you. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Debbie.
Bye. Thank you, Matt.